It is the most famous breakfast scene in cinematic history. A yellow taxi pulls up to an empty Fifth Avenue at dawn. A woman steps out wearing a black Givenchy evening gown, pearls cascading down her neck, oversized sunglasses hiding her eyes. She walks to the window of Tiffany Company, pulls a Danish pastry from a paper bag, and eats it while gazing at diamonds. That was 1961. The woman was Audrey Hepburn, and in that single moment, she redefined what elegance could look like. 22 inches at the waist, 110 pounds on a 5'7" frame. A silhouette so naturally perfect that 70 years later, the global beauty industry is still trying to reverse engineer it in laboratories and sell it back to you in subscription boxes. Here's what they desperately need you not to know. Audrey Hepburn never counted a single calorie, never owned a gym membership, never tracked macros or feared carbohydrates, never bought a meal replacement shake or followed an influencer's detox program. What Audrey had was a lifestyle rooted in European habits from the 1950s that aligned perfectly with human biology. Before, a multi-trillion-dollar industry was built around making those habits impossible. The global weight loss industry is worth over $250 billion annually. It survives by convincing you that elegance requires suffering, that beauty demands restriction, and that your body is a problem requiring constant, expensive management. Audrey Hepburn achieved the most envied figure in Hollywood history by doing the exact opposite of everything they are selling you today. Her son Luca Dotti documented exactly how she lived behind closed doors. The reality is breathtakingly simple, deeply effective, and completely unmonetizable. Before number 1, subscribe. This channel exists to expose the lies of modern diet culture by revealing the forgotten truths that actually worked. Hit that button. Now let's begin. Number 1, Audrey Hepburn understood the difference between voluntary restriction and genuine starvation, and it changed her relationship with food forever. This is where her story diverges completely from every modern diet narrative, and it begins not in Hollywood, but in Arnhem, Netherlands, during the winter of 1944. Audrey was 15 years old when the Nazi occupation entered its most brutal phase. The hunger winter had begun. German forces blockaded food supplies in retaliation for Dutch resistance. By February 1945, daily rations had fallen to approximately 400 calories. People ate tulip bulbs, sugar beets, and anything that could be foraged from frozen ground. Audrey survived it. She was severely malnourished, suffered anemia and edema, and developed health complications that affected her for years afterward. She spoke about this experience throughout her life not as trauma to process publicly, but as context that permanently redefined food from something to be feared into something to be genuinely appreciated. In a 1988 interview, she said, "I can walk into a bakery and I still can't believe the smell." After the war, bread smelled like the most extraordinary thing on earth. Because Audrey knew what real starvation felt like, she never voluntarily starved herself again. She ate when hungry and stopped when satisfied, not from superhuman discipline, but from an unbroken connection to her body's actual signals. Modern diet culture sells voluntary starvation as virtue. It teaches women to ignore hunger, fight their bodies, and treat an empty stomach as victory. The $90 billion diet industry depends on you believing that restriction equals discipline. Audrey had lived through genuine deprivation. She wanted no part of the performance version. She ate with pleasure, appreciation, and the particular peace that comes from someone who never forgot that food is fundamentally a gift, not an enemy. Number 2, Audrey ate pasta almost every day of her adult life and never once felt guilty about it. In today's nutritional climate, where the low-carb industry generates over $10 billion annually by demonizing entire food groups, this requires a moment of silence. Audrey's soul, as she described it, was Italian when it came to food. Her daily routine, documented by her son, centered around pasta-simple preparations like spaghetti al pomodoro with fresh tomatoes, olive oil, garlic, and basil. She made it by hand when she had time, from flour and eggs. She also ate real bread from local bakeries, not low-carb alternatives engineered to approximate bread while containing none of its actual ingredients. What Audrey understood intuitively, and what research increasingly confirms, is that the problem was never pasta or bread. The problem is what industrial processing does to them. Refined, bleached flour stripped of fiber and nutrients, combined with preservatives and additives, bears little metabolic resemblance to pasta made from semolina and eggs. Audrey's carbohydrates were real. Her body processed them as fuel, pleasure, and satisfaction exactly as human bodies have processed real carbohydrates for thousands of years. When you eat authentic pasta with olive oil and vegetables, the fiber and healthy fats slow digestion and stabilize blood sugar. The low-carb industry has spent billions convincing you that an entire macronutrient is your enemy. Audrey ate that macronutrient daily for 50 years, maintained her figure effortlessly, and never purchased a single product from the industry that would have told her she was doing it wrong. Number 3, Audrey's Elegance was built in a ballet studio, not a branded gym. Before Hollywood discovered her, Audrey spent years training seriously as a dancer. Hours of bar work, rehearsals, and precise movement that lengthened muscles, refined posture, and wired her nervous system to carry herself with impossible grace. She never stopped moving that way. Even decades later, friends recall her stretching daily, walking everywhere, gardening, and staying physically engaged with her environment. She preferred stairs to elevators, walking to driving when distances allowed. No one called it exercise. It was simply how she lived in her body. Research on neat, non-exercise activity thermogenesis shows that daily, unconscious movement contributes up to 2,000 calories of daily energy expenditure variance between individuals. This often matters more for long-term weight management than formal workouts. The 35 billion fitness industry exists because modern infrastructure systematically removed natural movement from daily life, then sold it back as premium monthly memberships. We sit motionless for 10 hours, then expect 45 minutes in a branded studio to undo the damage. Audrey's dancer training also gave her perfect posture. When your muscles hold you correctly, every motion costs slightly more energy and looks infinitely more elegant. Proper alignment makes you appear taller, leaner, and more confident without losing a single pound. Her neighborhood was her gym. Her posture was her core workout. Her daily life was her movement practice. Number 4, Audrey's portions were European, and Europe noticed the difference. Find a dinner plate from 1955 in an antique store. It will measure 9 inches across, almost dainty compared to today's standard 12-inch American plates. That 3-inch difference increases surface area by approximately 78%. Behavioral psychology consistently documents the portion size effect. People consume 20–30% more when larger portions are served, regardless of actual hunger levels. The brain reads the plate before the stomach reports its status. Audrey's 9-inch plate looked generous when full, but contained meaningfully less food than today's normal serving. She ate in the European tradition. Smaller plates, slower meals, food as experience rather than refueling stop. A proper lunch could take 90 minutes not from inefficiency, but because eating slowly allows your body's 20-minute satiety delay to catch up with consumption before overconsumption occurs. Restaurant portions followed the same pattern. What chains called large in 1960 would be listed as small today. Audrey finished meals satisfied rather than stuffed because satisfaction and fullness aren't the same thing, and European food culture never confused them. She never felt deprived because her plate was full. The plate was simply sized for human consumption rather than profit maximization. Number 5, Audrey drank water, coffee, and wine. That was essentially the complete list. In a world where the beverage industry has invented hundreds of categories generating over 300 billion annually, Audrey's approach to hydration was almost aggressively simple. Water throughout the massive quantities, according to her family. Black coffee or coffee with a small amount of real cream. Wine at dinner, European-style glass with food as part of the meal, not as separate liquid entertainment. She was obsessive about water long before hydration became a commercial industry. No vitamin-enhanced waters, no electrolyte powders with artificial sweeteners, no energy drinks combining caffeine with sugar in metabolically disastrous ways. The modern beverage industry exists because water cannot be trademarked and plain coffee has terrible profit margins. Every product they invented afterward replaced something your body already had access to for free. Liquid calories don't trigger fullness like solid food. Research shows you consume them in addition to meals, not instead of them. The average American now drinks approximately 400 calories daily. In Audrey's era, that number was nearly 0. Her beverages served biological purpose: hydration from water, gentle stimulation from coffee, social pleasure from wine. She never accidentally consumed 500 calories in an afternoon coffee drink because the concept hadn't been invented yet. Number 6, Audrey protected her sleep like it was a beauty treatment, which it was. Look at any photograph of Audrey Hepburn. There's an absence of inflammation in her face. No chronic puffiness, no exhausted bloat, no cortisol-sculpted stress lines. That's not just genetics, it's also rest. She was famously protective of her sleep schedule. Early nights, natural waking, naps without apology. During film productions, she maintained sleep routines that directors sometimes found inconvenient but her body clearly required. Modern sleep research confirms what Audrey practiced intuitively. Even mild sleep deprivation elevates ghrelin hunger hormone AB up to 28% while reducing leptin, which signals fullness. Sleep-restricted individuals consume an average of 300 additional calories daily, without any conscious dietary change. The 80 billion sleep aid industry sells supplements and devices to address a problem largely created by a culture treating sleep as optional and productivity as the only legitimate use of time. Audrey treated sleep as non-negotiable. Her body rewarded her with the hormonal stability that makes eating normally, moving comfortably, and maintaining weight effortlessly possible. Elegance comes from a place of calm, not just choreography. Number 7, Audrey's kitchen was her food system, not a convenience station. When Audrey moved to her Swiss farmhouse, she didn't just buy beautiful property, she built a relationship with the land that directly determined what appeared on her table. She grew vegetables, herbs, and maintained connections with local farmers. Her meals featured ingredients picked that morning: tomatoes from her garden, herbs cut minutes before use, eggs from nearby farms. Her son described meals with specificity that reveals a household organized around real, seasonal food. Vegetables harvested at peak ripeness, soups made from scratch with homemade stock, salads dressed with olive oil and lemon juice rather than bottled dressings containing 14 laboratory ingredients. Research shows that vegetables lose 55% of their nutritional content within a week of harvest. Audrey's tomatoes went from vine to plate within hours. When you cook from scratch, there's no high fructose corn syrup in your sauce because you didn't add it. No modified starches in your soup because it came from real bones and vegetables. Home-cooked food is structurally less calorie-dense because the person making it has no financial incentive to engineer it to the bliss point. The 1.6 trillion processed food industry employs scientists specifically to make products more compelling than anything you could create at home. Audrey's simple preparations had none of those engineered advantages. They were just real food designed by nature to satisfy, not by corporations to generate repeat purchases. Number 8, Audrey treated chocolate as daily medicine, not guilty pleasure. In Audrey's Swiss home, there was a specific drawer in the living room filled with dark chocolate. She ate a piece every day. Sometimes she baked dense chocolate cake for her family. She didn't call it a cheat meal or force herself to earn it through punishment exercise. She didn't experience the crushing guilt that modern diet culture attaches to enjoyment. The modern diet industry, worth $90 billion in the US, alone relies heavily on moralizing food. Research from the University of Canterbury proves that associating guilt with chocolate actually increases binge eating likelihood. When you label food forbidden, you increase its psychological power. Audrey neutralized chocolate's power by making it ordinary. Because she allowed herself daily access, it never became forbidden fruit. She could eat one piece, feel completely satisfied, and walk away without drama. High-quality dark chocolate contains flavonoids supporting cardiovascular health, magnesium, and compounds that genuinely improve mood through serotonin pathways. She wasn't indulging despite her health was supporting it. Modern research consistently shows that people who don't restrict treat foods consume less of them overall than those who label them off limits. Audrey bypassed the entire binge-restrict cycle that traps millions simply by refusing to believe that enjoying something sweet was moral failure. Number 9, Audrey practiced a 3-meal structure with zero snacking between. Breakfast, lunch, dinner. Between those fixed points, her digestive system rested. The kitchen wasn't a browsing destination at 3 p.m. In the 1950s, the snack food industry was practically non-existent. Today it's worth $108 billion. To grow that market, corporations had to convince people that feeling slight hunger between meals was a medical emergency, requiring hyperpalatable, packaged intervention. When you constantly snack, insulin levels never drop. Elevated insulin biologically locks you out of fat-burning mode, creating cycles of blood sugar spikes and crashes that generate perpetual hunger. Audrey's 3-meal rhythm allowed insulin to return to baseline between eating occasions. Her body naturally accessed stored energy during fasting periods. She didn't need scientific studies on intermittent fasting, it was simply the cultural rhythm of her time. Modern research in circadian biology confirms that consistent meal timing optimizes metabolism and reduces total intake without conscious restriction. The body thrives on predictability. Audrey's hunger arrived at mealtimes, was satisfied at mealtimes, and stayed quiet between. Not from superhuman discipline, but because nobody had yet engineered an environment designed to override those natural rhythms every 2 hours. Number 10, everything about Audrey Hepburn's beauty was built on something modern culture keeps trying to sell back to you. Simplicity. Simple food. Simple movement. Simple rhythms. Complex inner life. Her elegance wasn't purchased, it was practiced. It was the accumulated result of how she moved through ordinary days. How she ate, rested, walked, dressed, and occupied space. She had luminous skin not from 300 serums but from adequate sleep, real food, sufficient water, and the particular glow that comes from genuine purpose which, in her later years, was humanitarian work she described as more important than any film. The global beauty industry spends billions convincing you that what Audrey had can be purchased, that the right combination of products, programs, and expert guidance will produce effortless radiance. It cannot be purchased. It never could be. What Audrey had resulted from habits practiced daily without drama, audience, or brand partnerships. Real food from her garden, pasta made by hand, sleep taken seriously, walking done joyfully, chocolate eaten without guilt, water consumed without enhancement, portions sized for satisfaction rather than spectacle. These habits aren't glamorous or sellable. They don't require monthly subscriptions, consultations, or transformation photographs. They require only the decision to live as Audrey lived, with genuine attention to what the body actually needs and genuine indifference to industries that profit from convincing you both things are more complicated than they are. Audrey Hepburn died in 1993 at 63 from appendix cancerandum biological cruelty, having nothing to do with how she lived. She left behind films that still captivate audiences, humanitarian work reaching millions of vulnerable children, and a standard of natural elegance the beauty industry has spent 30 years trying to replicate without success. Most importantly, she left proof that you can move through an entire rich, complicated, beautiful life eating pasta and chocolate and butter, sleeping adequately, walking daily, cooking real food, and never once purchasing a product promising to fix what was never broken. Pick one thing from her life. Not a program or challenge and habit. Maybe cook one meal from scratch this week. Maybe walk somewhere you'd normally drive. Maybe eat chocolate without guilt, and notice what happens when you remove drama from food. Do it quietly for 7 days. Don't announce it or track it. Just do it, and pay attention to what changes. If this reminded you of something you already knew but forgot, hit like, share it with someone who needs to hear this, and subscribe. The industry profits from your confusion. Audrey's life proves the confusion was always optional. The next video is ready. Click it, and let's keep finding the truths they buried under everything they were selling you instead.